The ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jerrold Nadler of New York, by the way, that is the committee that would be charged with holding impeachment hearings against President Trump if it ever came to that. Congressman Nadler, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
Before I get started, you've been in Washington 26 years. I know you're in the House and the Senate, and those are real mortal enemies in Washington, right? The House and the Senate. Your thoughts on John McCain this morning?
Well, he was a true American hero. From his courageous service in Vietnam, when he refused the ability to go home and volunteered for a few more years of torture in the Hanoi Hilton, rather than get out of line and ahead of others, which he could have done, to his service to his country over the years. He was a true American hero, and it'll be a long time before we see his like.
Let me go to, after Michael Cohen essentially said the President of the United States was a co-conspirator with him in directing him to a federal crime. Should that trigger the start of an investigation in the Judiciary Committee that could end up going to impeachment or not, but the way our system works, is this the proper way it should begin?
Well, I think the Mueller investigation has to continue first and foremost, and the committee has to defend the Mueller investigation against the president's and the Republicans in Congress attempts to sabotage it, to discredit it, and to discredit the FBI and the Department of Justice. Congress is supposed to be a check and balance on the executive. We're supposed to guarantee accountability. Under the Republicans, it's been exactly the opposite. Chairman Nunes of the Intelligence Committee was caught on tape at a Republican fundraiser recently saying that he viewed his major role as protecting the president. The role of Congress is not to protect the president, it's to hold the president and any president accountable to the American people. And we ought to be holding investigations.
What would that look like today? Let's say you had a functional relationship with the other side. Okay, we know right now that's tough inside the House. But if you did, what would that look like? You and Congressman Goodlatte would be doing what?
Well, first of all, I hope we would confer with Mueller to see what we shouldn't do that would get in the way of his investigation. We don't want to step on, interfere with them by accident. But following that, we should be investigating all of these things: the possible interference of the Russians in our investigations, what we can do to make sure that that can't happen again, who in the United States aided and abetted that, if anybody, other crimes that may have been, not just crimes, but other improper acts in terms of the campaign. We should be investigating all of those things and bringing them to light for the American people, and possibly seeing if there's any legislation we should do to prevent their recurrence in the future. But again, we should talk to the Mueller people first to make sure we don't step on their investigation.
Let me ask you this. You know, you were one of Bill Clinton's most ardent defenders during his impeachment. You called it at the time a partisan coup d'etat. If you were charged with running something that, some form of an impeachment investigation, if you're chairman of the Judiciary Committee, which what would happen if Democrats took over Congress, how would you make sure that somehow you handled this differently than your Republican colleagues did 20 years ago?
I would take the same attitude I took then. I said then that impeachment is a constitutional provision to protect the Constitution against the president who would aggrandize power, who would ride roughshod over checks and balances, who pose a true threat to American liberty or to constitutional government and the rule of law. And I said also at the time, and therefore you should only do it under those circumstances. I also said at the time that you should not do an impeachment on a partisan basis. That in order to do an impeachment properly, you'd have to think that the evidence of threatening impeachable offenses, threatening to the constitutional order, threatening to liberty, were so overwhelming that by the end of the process, the overwhelming majority of the American people, including a lot of the people who supported the other side, would agree that you had to do it. And we certainly didn't have that then.
Obviously, Watergate did eventually have that.
Yes.
Let me ask you this final question here. Back in 1999, during the debate about whether or not President Clinton obstructed justice, you said at the time you weren't convinced that a president could obstruct justice. Do you still feel that way? That it's not one of, I think the quote, that might not be impeachable. Put it this way, that obstruction of justice might not be an impeachable offense.
Well, I don't remember saying that, but if I said it, I said it. But no, I don't agree with that today. A president, anybody can obstruct justice. An obstruction of justice under certain circumstances might be an impeachable offense. Remember, There's a very big difference between a crime, which may or may not be impeachable, and an impeachable offense, which doesn't have to be a crime. An impeachable offense.
So wait, there's some crimes that the president could commit that you would think is not impeachable?
Yes.
Like
Absolutely.
what, the affairs?
Well,
these campaign finance, this wouldn't, to you, rise to impeachable?
That might, because it implicates subverting the election process.
But you're skeptical, it sounds like.
I don't know. I haven't studied that. But certainly I said at the time that perjury with regard to a private sexual affair did not threaten the constitutional order, is a crime, but was not an impeachable offense. Perjury regarding an attempt by a president to subvert the constitutional order to aggrandise power probably would be an impeachable offense.
All right. Jerrold Nadler, I have to leave it there. Ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, representing New York City. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views,
Thank you.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.